The great council chamber stretched across 3 miles of polished crystal floor. Beings from dozens of worlds sat in curved rows that rose toward a domed ceiling, painted with star maps. The air hummed with translation devices working overtime as hundreds of different languages mixed together into a constant buzz. Ambassador Sarah Chen sat in the back section with the other human representatives. She watched the Zeltharan delegate speak from the center podium. His tall, thin frame moved with the grace that came from living on a low-gravity world. Blue light pulsed through the crystal patterns on his skin as he talked about trade routes and shipping costs. The outer colonies must contribute more to galactic defense, the Zeltharan said. His voice carried easily through the chamber's sound system. These worlds enjoy the protection of our fleets but pay very little for this service. Sarah looked down at her data tablet. The numbers told a different story. Human colonies had been paying their full share and more. Earth's military had been protecting 3 major shipping lanes without asking for extra payment. Human medical teams had been treating alien diseases on 17 different worlds, also for free. The Vorthak representative rose next. The insect-like being's forearms moved in patterns as she spoke. Her species shared thoughts through chemical signals, so they always seemed to move in perfect coordination. Our factories need more workers, the Vorthak said. The human colonies have many people. They should send more workers to our manufacturing worlds. Sarah felt her jaw tighten. The Vorthak factories were dangerous places. Humans who worked there often got sick from the chemical fumes. The pay was terrible and workers had no rights. The Vorthak treated their own people better than they treated alien workers. The Quintar delegate floated near the ceiling in a bubble of water. His tentacles waved as he added his thoughts to the discussion. The Quintar were telepaths who could read surface thoughts from most species. This gave them a big advantage in negotiations. We have detected growing resistance in human colonies, the Quintar said. His words came through a speaker attached to his water bubble. Perhaps stronger measures are needed to ensure cooperation. Sarah stood up. The movement was sudden enough that several delegates turned to look at her. Humans were rarely allowed to speak during main sessions. They were considered too new to galactic politics, too primitive to understand the complex relationships between older species. Point of order, Sarah said loudly. Her voice echoed in the huge chamber. Earth requests permission to address the council. The Zeltharan moderator looked annoyed. The human delegate may speak, but briefly. We have important matters to discuss. Sarah walked down the long aisle toward the central podium. Her footsteps seemed loud in the sudden quiet. She had practiced this speech many times, but now her heart was beating fast. What she was about to say would change everything. For 50 years humanity has been a member of this council, she began. We have followed every rule. We have paid every tax. We have sent our people to dangerous jobs on your worlds. We have shared our technology freely. We have protected your shipping routes with our military. She looked around the chamber. Most of the alien delegates looked bored. A few seemed curious about where this was going. In return, we have been treated like children, Sarah continued. Our ideas are ignored. Our colonies are given impossible quotas while others get special treatment. Our people are used as cheap labor. Our concerns are dismissed. The Zeltharan moderator made an impatient gesture. If the human delegate has a specific complaint, she should file the proper paperwork with the appropriate committee. Sarah smiled, but it was not a happy smile. I do have something specific to say. Humanity formally withdraws from the Galactic Council, effective immediately. The chamber fell completely silent. For a moment, the only sound was the hum of air recycling systems. Then dozens of delegates began talking at once. The translation devices struggled to keep up with the sudden flood of different languages. Impossible, the Zeltharan said. No species has ever left the council voluntarily. There is no legal mechanism for withdrawal, the Vorthak added. Sarah pulled out a thick document. Actually, there is. Article 847 of the Council Charter allows any member species to withdraw with proper notice. We are giving that notice now. The Quintar delegate's tentacles moved in agitated patterns. This is clearly an emotional outburst. Humans are known for their unstable emotions. Perhaps the delegate needs time to reconsider. We have considered this very carefully, Sarah said. For 2 years we have tried to work within this system. We have been patient. We have been diplomatic. We have been quiet. But we will not be treated as second-class citizens any longer. She placed the withdrawal document on the podium. All human military units will be pulled back from Council space within 60 days. All human medical teams will return to Earth. All human technical advisors will end their contracts. All human colonies will cease communication with Council worlds. The chamber erupted in angry voices. Several delegates stood up and shouted in their native languages. The Zeltheran moderator banged his crystal gavel repeatedly, trying to restore order. "You cannot survive without the Council," the Vorthak said. "Your species is too young, too weak. You need our protection." Sarah picked up her data tablet and headed back toward the exit. "We will manage just fine on our own. Thank you for the lesson in self-reliance." As she walked up the long aisle, other human delegates fell in step behind her. There were only 12 humans in the chamber, but they moved together with quiet dignity. None of them looked back. Behind them, the argument continued. Some delegates called for sanctions against humanity. Others worried about losing human technical support. A few suggested military action to force the humans to stay. The Quintar delegate read the surface thoughts of everyone in the chamber. What he found there surprised him. Most species were not particularly concerned about humanity leaving. Humans were useful but not essential. The galaxy had survived for millions of years without them. It would continue just fine. Outside the chamber, Sarah stopped at the communication hub. She sent a priority message to every human world, colony, and ship in the galaxy. The message was simple: come home. Over the next 6 months, the human exodus was quiet but complete. Military ships pulled back from patrol routes they had protected for decades. Medical teams finished their current cases and then packed up their equipment. Technical advisors completed their contracts and left. Human colonies on the outer rim began shutting down their communication arrays. Trade ships stopped making regular runs to Council worlds. Research stations went dark. Within half a year, it was as if humanity had simply vanished. The Council worlds barely noticed at first. Trade continued. The military seemed adequate. Medical supplies kept flowing from other sources. Life went on as normal. Only a few beings paid attention to the small changes. Shipping costs went up slightly. When human patrol ships disappeared, some exotic medicines became harder to find. A few technical systems required more maintenance than before. But these were minor problems. The great civilizations of the galaxy had resources and knowledge that small young humanity could never match. They would adapt. They would improve. They would prove that they had never really needed the humans at all. Sarah Chen stood on the observation deck of the last human ship leaving Council space. Earth was still 3 months away, but she could feel herself getting closer to home with each passing day. Behind them, the lights of the galactic core grew smaller and dimmer. "Do you think they will learn?" asked Dr. Martinez, her chief of staff. Sarah watched the stars wheel past the viewport. "Eventually, but it will take time. Some lessons can only be learned the hard way." 6 months had passed since the humans left, and Council Coordinator Zalthesh was having a very bad day. The Quintar floated in his water-filled office, surrounded by holographic displays showing data from across the galaxy. The numbers were not good. His tentacles moved nervously as he reviewed the latest reports. Medical supply shortages were appearing in 17 different sectors. At first, the shortages seemed random and small. A missing batch of painkillers here, some antibiotics there. But the pattern was becoming clear. The missing medicines were all human-developed drugs. Humans had a strange talent for understanding how different alien biologies worked. They could create medicines that worked safely for species that had completely different body chemistry. No other race had ever been able to do this effectively. Dr. Kelvara, the Andorian medical chief, appeared on his communication screen. Her green face looked tired and worried. "Coordinator, we need to talk. The situation is worse than our reports show." "Explain," Zalthesh said, though he was afraid he already knew what she would say. "The humans took all their medical research with them when they left. We thought we could reproduce their drugs using our own science. We were wrong." Dr. Kelvara pulled up a holographic display showing molecular structures. "Their medicines work because they understand something about cross-species biochemistry that we do not." Zalthesh's tentacles curled in frustration. "Surely our scientists can figure out their methods. Humans are a primitive species. How advanced could their techniques be?" "That is exactly the problem," Dr. Kelvara said. "We have been calling them primitive for so long that we never bothered to really study what they were doing. We just took their medicines and used them. Now we cannot make them ourselves. The communication ended, leaving Zalthesh alone with his troubling thoughts. He called up another set of reports, hoping for better news. Instead, he found more problems. Pirate attacks in the outer sectors had increased by 300%. The shipping lanes that humans had patrolled were now dangerous to travel. Other species' military ships were either too few, too slow, or too valuable to waste on constant patrol duty. The Zeltharan had tried to fill the gap with their crystal ships, but they moved too slowly to catch pirates. The Vorthak had sent some of their military vessels, but they were needed to protect their own manufacturing worlds. The remaining council species either had no military to spare or wanted payment for protection services. Captain Thexkar of the Zeltharan fleet appeared on another communication channel. His blue skin was darker than usual, which meant he was stressed. Coordinator, we lost another convoy today. 12 ships carrying medical supplies to the Rim colonies. Where were your patrol ships? Zalthesh asked. We had one ship covering a patrol route that humans used to cover with 5 ships, Captain Thexkar replied. The pirates knew our schedule. They waited until our ship was at the far end of its route, then attacked the convoy. Zalthesh felt a sinking feeling in his water. How did the pirates know your schedule? The same way they always knew human schedules, the captain said grimly. Except humans change their routes randomly every few days. They never followed the same pattern twice. We follow standard military doctrine with predictable patrol times. The communication ended, and Zalthesh was left staring at reports of 14 separate pirate attacks in the past week alone. Human patrol doctrine had seemed chaotic and wasteful when they were doing it. Now he was beginning to understand that their random patterns had been much more effective than traditional methods. Another urgent message arrived, this one from the Vorthak manufacturing coordinators. Zalthesh opened it with growing dread. The Vorthak factories were running at 65% efficiency. Production delays were causing shortages across dozens of worlds. The problem was not with their workers or their equipment. The problem was with their management systems. For decades, humans had been quietly improving Vorthak manufacturing processes. They had created computer programs that helped coordinate production between different factories. They had designed systems that predicted when machines would need maintenance. They had written algorithms that managed supply chains across multiple star systems. The Vorthak had thought these were just simple computer programs. When humans left, they had tried to replace the systems with their own software. But human-designed programs had been much more complex than they appeared. They had been learning and adapting constantly, making thousands of small improvements every day. Without those programs, the Vorthak manufacturing network was slowly breaking down. Orders were getting lost. Machines were breaking down unexpectedly. Supply deliveries were arriving at the wrong times or wrong places. Zalthesh pulled up a galaxy-wide economic report. The numbers were getting worse every week. Trade volume was down 18%. Transportation costs were up 32%. Several important trade routes had been abandoned entirely due to pirate activity. He had called for an emergency council session to discuss these problems. The response had been disappointing. Most delegates seemed more interested in blaming each other than in finding solutions. The Zeltharan representative, Dr. Veltar, had been particularly dismissive during the last meeting. These are temporary adjustments, he had said with typical Zeltharan arrogance. The galaxy managed perfectly well for millions of years before humans arrived. We will adapt and improve. But privately, Zalthesh had been receiving urgent communications from Zeltharan worlds. Their trade empire was built on efficient shipping routes and predictable supply chains. With human protection gone and transportation costs rising, their profit margins were disappearing. The Andorian colonies were reporting food shortages. Human agricultural specialists had been managing their farming systems, adjusting crop rotation and soil treatment for alien plants growing in alien soil. Without human expertise, crop yields were falling dramatically. The Talveri research stations were going offline one by one. Humans had been maintaining their computer networks and laboratory equipment. The Talveri were brilliant scientists, but they had never learned to fix their own machinery. They had always relied on human technicians for that work. Even the Quintar were having problems, though they were trying to hide it. Their telepathic communication networks depended on relay stations that humans had built and maintained. Several stations had failed in the past month, creating dead zones in their mental communication grid. Zalthesh composed a carefully worded report for the council. He highlighted the most serious problems and suggested that perhaps they should consider opening diplomatic contact with the humans. Maybe they could work out some kind of limited cooperation agreement. The response came back within hours. The three major powers, Zeltharan, Vorthak, and Quintar, rejected his suggestion completely. They insisted that these problems were temporary. The galaxy would adapt. They would not show weakness by asking humans for help. That evening, Zalthesh floated in his office and watched news reports from across the galaxy. A mining accident on Kepler 7 had killed 43 workers because safety systems that humans had installed were no longer being properly maintained. A plague outbreak on Vega Colony was spreading because the medical team there could not produce the vaccines that human doctors had been making. The reports kept coming, and they were all the same. Systems failing, knowledge missing, problems that had been solved for decades suddenly becoming deadly again. Zalthesh began to understand something that terrified him. The humans had not just been junior members of galactic civilization. They had become part of the foundation that held everything together. And when they left quietly, they had taken crucial pieces of that foundation with them. The galaxy was still functioning, but cracks were starting to show, small cracks that would grow larger with time. And Zalthesh was beginning to suspect that the most powerful species in the galaxy were too proud to admit they had made a terrible mistake. He composed another report, this one marked as urgent priority. In it, he recommended immediate diplomatic contact with human worlds. He sent it to every council member and waited for their response. The answer came back quickly. Request denied. The emergency alarm woke Commander Nextala from deep sleep. Her forearms moved quickly as she pulled herself out of bed and reached for her communication device. The sound meant only one thing. Someone was dying on a massive scale. "Commander, we have a catastrophic failure at Kepler Station," came the voice of her communications officer. "Multiple hull breaches, life support failing across 17 sectors. Estimated casualties in the thousands." Nextala was already pulling on her uniform as she responded. "How many ships do we have in that sector?" 3 rescue vessels, but they cannot handle an evacuation of this size. Kepler Station houses over 20,000 beings from 12 different species. The commander rushed to her ship's bridge, where her crew was already tracking the disaster. On the main screen, she could see Kepler Station spinning slowly against the stars. The massive structure was over 50 miles long, a crucial trading hub where 7 major shipping routes came together. "What caused the failure?" she asked her chief engineer. "Life support systems collapsed simultaneously across multiple sections," came the grim response. "Atmospheric processors that maintained air for different species all failed within minutes of each other." Nextala felt a cold understanding settle in her stomach. "Who was maintaining those systems?" Her engineer checked his records. "According to the files, human technicians. But they were replaced 6 months ago with Zeltharan specialists. By the time rescue ships arrived, 17,000 beings were dead. The life support failure had been swift and complete. Atmospheric mixes that had been carefully balanced for multiple species had become toxic within hours. Emergency systems that should have prevented the disaster had also failed. The investigation that followed revealed a horror that nobody wanted to acknowledge. Kepler Station's life support was incredibly complex. It had to maintain perfect atmospheric conditions for dozens of different species, each with completely different breathing requirements. The Zeltharan engineers who had taken over from humans had considered the existing systems to be inefficient and primitive. They had begun making improvements immediately, applying standard Zeltharan engineering principles to make the systems more elegant and logical. What they had not understood was that the humans had designed those systems to be redundant and adaptable rather than efficient. Every species had backup systems that could compensate if their primary atmosphere failed. The systems constantly monitored and adjusted themselves to handle unexpected changes. The Zeltharan improvements had removed what they saw as unnecessary redundancy. They had streamlined the systems to be more efficient. They had eliminated the adaptive monitoring programs that humans had installed, replacing them with simpler systems that followed standard protocols. When a small problem occurred in one atmospheric processor, the streamlined system had no way to compensate. The failure cascaded through the entire station within minutes. turning the air toxic for multiple species simultaneously. The Kepler station disaster was just the beginning. On Vega Prime, a space elevator collapsed when its human-designed maintenance schedule was replaced with a more logical Andorian system. The humans had required constant small adjustments to account for weather, solar radiation, and orbital mechanics. The Andorian system had assumed that such frequent maintenance was wasteful and inefficient. The elevator fell from orbit like a burning snake, destroying 3 cities and killing hundreds of thousands. Terraforming projects on 12 colony worlds failed within weeks of each other. Human atmospheric specialists had been carefully monitoring the delicate balance of gases, temperature, and pressure needed to maintain breathable air on artificial worlds. When they left, other species had tried to take over using standard terraforming protocols. The problem was that each terraformed world was unique. Standard protocols worked for new terraforming projects, but maintaining existing atmospheric systems required constant adjustment and monitoring. Humans had been making thousands of small corrections every day, changes so small that other species had not even noticed them happening. Without those adjustments, the artificial atmospheres began to fail. On 3 worlds, the air became unbreathable within days. Entire colonies had to be evacuated, leaving behind decades of development and infrastructure. The worst failure came when the Galactic Defense Grid went offline. The Defense Grid was a network of automated weapons platforms, sensor arrays, and communication relays that protected Council space from external threats. It had successfully repelled 2 major invasions from extragalactic species in the past decade. The system was incredibly complex, coordinating responses across hundreds of different worlds and species. Each species had different reaction times, different weapon systems, and different tactical doctrines. Making them all work together had always been nearly impossible. Humans had solved this problem by creating an adaptive, artificial intelligence that learned how each species fought and found ways to coordinate their efforts effectively. The AI made millions of decisions every second, constantly adjusting tactics to account for the strengths and weaknesses of different military forces. When the humans left, they had taken their AI with them. Other species had tried to replace it with their own coordination systems, but nothing worked as well. Each species' military computers were designed to work with their own forces, not with alien allies. The defense grid began failing in sections. Response times increased dramatically. Coordination between different species' fleets became chaotic and inefficient. When a probe from an unknown extragalactic civilization appeared at the edge of Council space, the defense grid's response was so confused and slow that the probe escaped easily after gathering detailed intelligence about Council military capabilities. Ambassador Tekvar of the Naldari finally made a formal motion during a Council session to send diplomatic envoys to contact the humans. His people were among the smaller species that had always been treated better by humans than by the major powers. "We need their expertise," he said plainly. "Our infrastructure is collapsing. Our defenses are failing. Pride will not fix these problems." The response from the 3 major powers was swift and harsh. Dr. Veltar of the Zeltheron spoke first. "The Naldari delegate seems to have forgotten that we are dealing with temporary technical difficulties. These problems will be resolved through proper engineering and careful planning." The Vorthak representative agreed. Asking for human assistance would show weakness to our enemies. It would suggest that the great civilizations of the galaxy cannot solve simple technical problems. The Quintar delegate floated in his water bubble, his tentacles moving in agitation. "We have detected human ships observing our space from beyond the rim. They are clearly waiting for us to fail so they can return and demand better treatment. We will not give them this satisfaction." The motion was defeated by a wide margin. The major powers had convinced most of the smaller species that asking for human help would be a sign of weakness and failure. But privately, emergency meetings were happening on dozens of worlds. Technical specialists and military commanders were reporting the same thing everywhere. Systems that had worked perfectly for decades were failing rapidly. Knowledge that they had taken for granted was proving to be irreplaceable. Commander Nextala finished reading the final report on the Kepler station disaster. The conclusion was clear and terrifying. The humans had not just been maintaining the station's life support systems. They had been constantly improving and adapting them, making thousands of small changes that other species had never noticed or understood. When the humans left, they had taken decades of accumulated knowledge and experience with them, knowledge that could not be replaced quickly or easily, knowledge that was proving to be far more important than anyone had realized. She sent a private message to her government, recommending immediate diplomatic contact with human worlds. She knew it would be ignored, just like all the other warnings that were being sent by technical specialists across the galaxy. The great powers were too proud to admit they had made a mistake. They would rather watch their civilization crumble than ask humans for help. And from what Nextala could see in the reports crossing her desk every day, that crumbling was accelerating. The Vorthak collective mind was experiencing something it had never felt before: panic. Across their network of manufacturing worlds, the hive mind consciousness that connected billions of individual Vorthak was fragmenting under the strain of cascading system failures. Queen Mother Zelthara felt the panic like a physical pain. Her species had shared thoughts and emotions for millions of years. Individual Vorthak rarely felt strong emotions because the collective mind distributed feelings across the entire population. But now the fear and confusion were so intense that even the hive mind could not absorb it all. The manufacturing systems that had made the Vorthak the industrial powerhouse of the galaxy were operating at less than 40% efficiency. What had started as minor production delays had become a complete breakdown of their economic foundation. On Vorthak Prime, medical supply factories had shut down completely when their production algorithms failed. These were not simple computer programs. They were complex systems that had been constantly learning and adapting, making millions of tiny adjustments to maintain quality and efficiency. The humans had built those systems to work like living things, constantly growing and improving. When the humans left, the Vorthak had tried to replace them with their own programming. But Vorthak software was designed to follow precise instructions, not to learn and adapt. Without the adaptive algorithms, quality control had collapsed. Medicines that should have been identical were coming out with dangerous variations in their chemical composition. Medical equipment was being manufactured with critical flaws that made it unsafe to use. Dr. Cathera, the chief medical coordinator for the Outer Rim territories, sent an emergency broadcast to all Vorthak worlds. We can no longer guarantee the safety of our medical products. All shipments must be suspended immediately until we can resolve these quality control issues. The suspension of medical shipments created an instant crisis across dozens of worlds. Hospitals that depended on Vorthak medical supplies found themselves running out of critical medicines within days. Disease outbreaks that had been controlled for decades suddenly became deadly again. On Rigel Colony, a plague that had been eradicated 50 years ago reappeared when the supply of preventive vaccines was cut off. The local medical team tried to produce their own vaccines using stored samples, but they lacked the human-designed manufacturing techniques that ensured the vaccines were safe and effective. Within 2 weeks, the plague had killed over 200,000 colonists. The Rigel government issued a desperate plea for help, but no other species had the medical knowledge needed to stop the outbreak. Similar disasters were happening across the galaxy. On Altair 7, a mining accident trapped 300 workers underground when safety equipment failed. The equipment had been manufactured by Vorthak factories using human-designed quality control systems. Without those systems, critical flaws in the equipment had gone undetected. The rescue operation lasted 6 days. Only 37 miners were pulled out alive. Queen Mother Zelthara called an emergency session of the collective mind. For the first time in Vorthak history, the hive mind was unable to reach consensus. Different groups of Vorthak were experiencing different levels of panic and proposing different solutions. Some wanted to contact the humans immediately and ask for help. Others insisted that they could solve the problems themselves if given more time. A few even suggested that they should declare war on the humans for deliberately sabotaging Vorthak systems. The lack of consensus was itself a crisis. The Vorthak had never experienced internal conflict on this scale. Their entire social structure was built on shared decision-making through the collective mind. When the collective could not agree, their civilization began to break down at a fundamental level. While the Vorthak were dealing with internal chaos, war broke out between the Zeltharan Empire and the Quintar Confederacy. The conflict started over control of the Nexus trade route, a crucial shipping lane that connected 12 major star systems. With human patrol ships gone, pirate attacks on the route had made it too dangerous for normal commercial traffic. Both the Zeltharan and the Quintar claimed they had the right to provide protection services for the route. Both demanded payment from ships using the lane. When merchant vessels refused to pay double protection fees, both species began seizing ships and cargo. The situation escalated when a Zeltharan patrol fleet attacked a Quintar military convoy. Claiming the Quintar ships were pirates in disguise, the Quintar responded by destroying a Zeltharan trade station, killing over 10,000 civilians. Ambassador Thekvar of the Naldari tried desperately to arrange peace negotiations. In the past, humans had been able to mediate disputes between the major powers. They had a strange talent for finding compromise solutions that allowed both sides to feel they had won something important. But without human mediators, the negotiations failed immediately. The Zeltharan demanded complete control of the Nexus route. The Quintar insisted that they had equal rights to the territory. Neither side was willing to compromise, and no other species had the diplomatic skills needed to find a middle ground. The war spread quickly. Within months, fighting had broken out on 17 different worlds. Trade routes that had been peaceful for centuries became battlefields. Civilian populations fled their homes as military fleets bombarded planets and space stations. The economic impact was devastating. Insurance companies stopped covering ships traveling through contested space. Trade volume collapsed as merchants refused to risk their cargo in war zones. Entire sectors of the galaxy were cut off from regular commerce. Even worse, the war was being fought with outdated tactics and strategies. Human military advisors had spent decades teaching alien species how to coordinate their forces effectively. They had developed new tactical doctrines that minimized civilian casualties while maximizing military effectiveness. Without human guidance, both sides reverted to older, more destructive methods of warfare. They bombed civilian targets, destroyed infrastructure, and showed no concern for limiting the damage to non-combatants. The Free Colonies Alliance formed almost overnight when 47 Outer Rim territories declared independence from the Galactic Council. These worlds had watched the core systems descend into chaos and decided they could no longer depend on the major powers for protection or support. Governor Sarah Kim of New Hokkaido was elected as the first president of the Alliance. She had been one of the last humans to leave Council space, helping to evacuate human civilians from worlds that were becoming increasingly hostile to aliens. "We cannot wait for the Council to solve its problems," she announced in her inaugural address. "Our worlds must become self-sufficient. We must learn to protect ourselves and take care of our own people." The Alliance worlds began trading exclusively with each other, cutting off economic ties with the core systems. They formed their own military alliance to protect their space from pirates and hostile fleets. Most importantly, they began developing their own technological and medical capabilities to replace what they had lost when humans left. The core worlds initially dismissed the alliance as a temporary rebellion that would collapse when the Outer Rim worlds realized they could not survive without support from the major civilizations. But as months passed, the alliance grew stronger, while the core systems grew weaker. The Andorian agricultural worlds were among the first to join the alliance after their food production systems collapsed. Human agricultural specialists had been managing the complex crop rotation and soil treatment systems needed to grow food for multiple alien species. Without human expertise, crop yields had fallen by over 60%. Starvation was becoming a real threat on several heavily populated core worlds that had always imported most of their food from the agricultural rim. Territories. Council Coordinator Zalthesh floated in his office, surrounded by reports of disaster from every corner of the galaxy. Military casualties from the Zeltharan-Quintar War were approaching 2 million. Economic output had fallen by 45%. Over 30 civilizations had either collapsed completely or withdrawn from galactic affairs. The council chamber itself was nearly empty now. Of the 67 species that had been members when humans left, only 18 still maintained active representation. The rest had either been destroyed, had withdrawn to focus on their own survival, or had joined the Free Colonies Alliance. Zalthesh composed what he knew would be his final report as council coordinator. In it, he documented the complete breakdown of galactic civilization and recommended immediate diplomatic contact with human worlds. He sent the report to every remaining council member and waited for their response. For the first time in 2 years, the major powers agreed with his recommendation. The galaxy was dying, and they finally understood that only the humans could save it. The response came in the form of an emergency council session. For the first time since humans had left, the chamber was filled with a sense of desperate urgency rather than political posturing. Dr. Veltar of the Zeltheron stood at the central podium, his usual arrogance replaced by obvious desperation. We must contact the humans immediately. Our civilization is collapsing. The motion passed unanimously. The human ship appeared at the edge of council space without warning. It was a simple vessel, nothing like the massive warships or elegant diplomatic cruisers that other species used for important occasions. The ship looked like a working vessel, built for function rather than appearance. Council Coordinator Zalthesh received the message first. His tentacles trembled as he read the simple text. The Earth delegation requests an audience with the Galactic Council. We will arrive at the main station in 72 hours. The council chamber that had once housed representatives from 67 different species now held delegates from only 12 worlds. The great curved rows of seats were mostly empty. The crystal floors that had once gleamed with pride were now dull and cracked in places. Dr. Veltar of the Zeltheran Empire sat in what had once been the most prestigious section of the chamber. His empire now controlled less than half the territory it had ruled 3 years ago. Entire sectors had declared independence or been abandoned due to infrastructure failures. The Vorthak Collective had sent only 3 representatives, a sign of how severely their hive mind had been damaged by the manufacturing crisis. Queen Mother Zelthara herself was too mentally unstable to attend council sessions. The collective mind that had once connected billions of Vorthak across hundreds of worlds was now fragmented into dozens of smaller groups that could barely communicate with each other. The Quintar delegation consisted of a single being, floating in a damaged water bubble. Their telepathic communication network had failed completely when too many relay stations broke down. Most Quintar worlds were now isolated from each other, unable to share thoughts across interstellar distances for the first time in their species' history. When the human delegation entered the chamber, the silence was complete. Ambassador Sarah Chen walked down the central aisle, her hair now silver, her face marked by 3 years of responsibility and difficult decisions. She was flanked by 2 human advisors carrying data tablets and looking completely calm. Chen stopped at the central podium and looked around the nearly empty chamber. Her expression showed no satisfaction at seeing the mighty Galactic Council reduced to a handful of desperate survivors. She looked like someone who had come to help, not to gloat. We have been monitoring galactic affairs from beyond the rim, she began without ceremony. We are aware of the medical crises, the infrastructure failures, the wars, and the economic collapse. We are prepared to offer assistance. The chamber erupted in desperate voices as delegates spoke over each other in dozens of different languages. The translation systems, which had not been properly maintained since human technicians left, struggled to keep up with the sudden flood of communication. Zalthesh managed to restore order by floating to the center of the chamber and speaking directly to Chen. Ambassador, the Council, we need help. Our worlds are dying, Chen nodded calmly. We know. We have medical ships standing by to assist with plague outbreaks on 14 worlds. We have engineering teams ready to restore life support systems on critical stations. We have agricultural specialists prepared to help restore food production on the rim colonies. Dr. Veltar leaned forward, his blue skin almost gray with stress. What are your conditions? What do you want in return? Chen smiled, and for the first time there was warmth in her expression. Our conditions are simple. Humanity will establish a new organization called the Cooperative Systems Alliance. Any species that wishes to join will be treated as equal partners. She gestured to one of her advisors, who activated a holographic display showing the proposed structure of the new alliance. All decisions will be made by consensus, with every member having veto power over any proposal that affects them. No species will be considered senior or junior members. Technology and knowledge will be shared freely among all alliance members. The Quintar delegates' tentacles moved in what might have been confusion or hope. And the existing council structure? The Galactic Council is welcome to join the alliance as equal members, Chen replied. The hierarchical system that placed some species above others will end. Every member species will have the same rights and responsibilities. There was a long silence as the implications sank in. The great powers that had ruled the galaxy for millions of years would have no more influence than the smallest colony world. The Zelthuran, Vorthak, and Quintar would be equal partners with species they had once considered primitive or irrelevant. Dr. Veltar stood slowly, his movements showing the weight of his empire's collapse. And if we refuse this arrangement? Chen's expression remained calm and friendly. Then humanity wishes you well in your future endeavors. We have learned to be completely self-sufficient beyond the rim. We are offering partnership, not dependence. The chamber fell silent again as delegates considered their options. They could reject the human offer and continue struggling with problems they could not solve. Or they could accept equality with species they had once dominated. The vote was unanimous. Every remaining council member voted to dissolve the Galactic Council and join the human-led alliance as equal partners. Over the following weeks, the transformation was remarkable. Human medical teams arrived on plague-stricken worlds within days. The outbreaks that had killed millions were brought under control using human-developed treatments and prevention techniques. Human engineers restored life support systems on dozens of stations and colonies. But more importantly, they taught local technicians how to maintain and improve the systems themselves. They shared their knowledge freely, ensuring that the same failures could not happen again. Human agricultural specialists helped restart food production on the rim worlds, but they also trained local farmers in the techniques needed to feed multiple alien species safely and efficiently. Instead of creating dependence, they were building competence. The Free Colonies Alliance voted to merge with the new Cooperative Systems Alliance, bringing 47 additional worlds into the partnership. The combined alliance now included over 60 species working together as equals. The war between the Zelthuran and Quintar ended within a month. Human diplomatic mediators helped both sides find a face-saving compromise that divided the contested territory fairly and established shared patrol, responsibilities for trade route, protection. But the most remarkable change was in how the species interacted with each other. The old system of major and minor powers was replaced by a network of cooperation, where each species contributed their unique strengths to solve common problems. The Zelthuran crystal technology was combined with human adaptive software to create a new generation of starships that were both elegant and highly functional. Vorthak manufacturing expertise was merged with human quality control systems to produce goods that were both efficient and reliable. Quintar telepathic abilities were integrated with human communication networks to create faster and more reliable interstellar communication. 6 months after the alliance was formed, Council Coordinator Zalthesh, now Alliance Administrator Zalthesh, met privately with Ambassador Chen in what had once been the Council Coordinator's office. "How did you know?" he asked. "How did your species understand what would happen when you left?" Chen looked out through the office's large viewport at the busy station outside. Ships from dozens of species were docking and departing in perfect coordination, their crews working together regardless of their biological differences. "We did not plan the collapse," she said honestly. "We simply left because we were tired of being treated like children. But we learned something important during our 50 years in the Council." She turned to face Zalthesh directly. "We learned that true strength comes from lifting others up, not from standing above them. When we left, we took that philosophy with us. It took the galaxy 3 years to learn what humans have always known." Zalthesh's tentacles moved in what was the Quintar equivalent of a nod. "And what is that?" Chen smiled. "That cooperation is stronger than domination. That diversity is more valuable than hierarchy. That a civilization built on equality and mutual respect is more stable and prosperous than one built on power and control." Outside the viewport, a mixed crew of humans, Zelthuran and Vorthak, worked together to repair a damaged station module. They moved with the easy coordination of people who respected each other as equals and partners. "The old council tried to create unity through control," Chen continued. "The alliance creates unity through cooperation. It is a much stronger foundation for building a galactic civilization." 5 years later, the Cooperative Systems Alliance had grown to include 93 different species. Trade flourished under the egalitarian system that gave every world equal access to markets and resources. Technology sharing had advanced every member species by decades. Scientific research that had been limited by species rivalries now proceeded at an unprecedented pace as different forms of intelligence worked together to solve complex problems. Medical advances that had taken decades to develop were now achieved in months through cross-species collaboration. The galaxy was more prosperous, more peaceful, and more scientifically advanced than it had ever been in recorded history. In the former council chamber, now converted into a memorial for those who had died during the collapse,